you for being here today. We're going to be talking about safeguarding here at KISRP and some things that you can be doing at home to make sure that you're safeguarding your children. It's really important to understand that I always provide a trigger warning at the beginning of this. Some of the things that we are talking about might be difficult. If you feel like you need to step out of the room at any point in time, please feel free to do so and we can follow up with you afterwards. I think you know us by this point, so we're going to skip that one. Here's the rest of our team. This is the safeguarding team that looks at our policies and procedures here at school. They're the teams that comes together when we have a situation that we need to discuss. They're also the people that you can turn to if you ever have a concern on our campus. This is the safeguarding team. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, safeguarding is the umbrella term that we use to ensure that all students feel safe, healthy, and are treated with respect within our community. Child protection is part of the safeguarding umbrella, but child protection more so refers to harm and abuse and neglect. Safeguarding procedures are different from emergency procedures. We often get grouped into fire drills and earthquake drills and other things. While those are safeguarding practices, our work in terms of what we do is more along the lines of those first two that are listed there. We want to stress the importance of safeguarding. This is obviously something that is important to us as a school and as a community. It's also something that's prevalent in the world, not just here in Thailand, but we pulled some facts that are relevant to our region and our area. Childline is an organization, it's a nonprofit here in Thailand. It's probably the most prominent organization that deals with safeguarding to assist children and families throughout the process. So they are receiving a call every 15 minutes from somebody here in Thailand, and oftentimes children. They can call and they can go into their centers as well to get support or assistance when needed. So they deal with, I think, about 40,000 calls or contacts, like I said, often from students throughout the year. It's estimated that about 40% of children in the Asia Pacific region have experienced emotional and or physical abuse. And then you can see there the statistics about having only about 9,000 health professionals for a population of 65 million here in Thailand. So there's a long ways to go in terms of getting the support and the help that everybody needs around this topic. And that's why we're here to talk to you today. Over to Jessica.
So we want to start by doing some definitions for you. If you had come to our safeguarding workshop last year, we are going to review some of those things, but we actually have quite a lot of new content to cover today. But we want to make sure that we are defining some different types of abuse first. Before we get into the other parts of the content. So generally speaking, these are the four types of abuse that we tend to see. The first type of abuse is physical abuse. The information below are some potential signs that a child might be experiencing physical abuse. Things like unexplained injuries, children who go away for a break and then don't come back immediately, sometimes covering with long sleeves in particularly hot weather, and having an unusual fear of parental contact from the school. Psychological abuse is more about a child who fears humiliation, fears bizarre punishments that aren't typical of general parenting, social isolation, kids who have a lot of mood swings, are withdrawn. This might be considered something like emotional abuse. That's another term for psychological abuse. That might include things like calling a child names, threatening them with things that would be very harmful to them, generally giving them a sense of insecurity or not feeling emotionally safe. Neglect can be in a lot of different forms. It can be in the form of physical neglect, meaning that I'm not feeding my child, I'm not making sure my child gets enough sleep, I'm not bathing my child or providing them with sufficient clothing. It can also be a child who is emotionally neglected, meaning when my child has a need, I don't respond to it consistently. It also might mean mental health-wise. If my child has a mental health need, I ignore it, or I don't seek help for that. And it can also be with physical medical needs. So my child is sick and I don't take them to a doctor. My child is hurt and I don't get help for them. It can also pertain to school. So there is something called educational neglect, and that is I don't make sure my child is consistently attending school. And the last form of abuse is sexual abuse. Children who are subject to sexual abuse might ask questions about secrets, and later we'll talk a little bit more about what the school does in safeguarding curriculum against sexual abuse. But this adults asking you to keep secrets is kind of a big red flag for us. Children who reached a developmental milestone like potty training, but then regress and are wetting or soiling themselves. Unusualized sexualized behavior and clinginess are all signs of potential sexual abuse. So now that we have these general terms out of the way, I do want to speak to the needs of some of the early years parents and parents who have babies at home. This is some information about some signs that we sometimes see with children who experience physical abuse who are under the age of 4 or nonverbal, right? So you can see over here that when we look at children who are most vulnerable to maltreatment, it's actually our youngest children, right? So children who are under 1 year old are most likely to experience physical abuse. And part of that reason is just that babies are really hard and it triggers parents' nervous systems, right, to be really activated. So things like shaken baby syndrome are common, right, when parents become really overwhelmed by the needs of an infant. You can see as children age, they become less and less subject to physical abuse. They also become bigger and bigger, right? They also learn how to advocate for themselves, how to talk. They have more safe adults in their life, etc. Over here is a not great way to remember it, but I'm going to tell you anyways. It's 10 for faces P. But this is the different physical signs of abuse that are not typical in just play behavior. They tend to be more purposeful. So a child who has bruises on their trunk, ears, or neck, it's very uncommon to have that from play. They say any baby who's under 4 months, because they're not typically moving very much, should not have bruises, right? So saying if you are not cruising, you're not bruising. Under here, where it says frenulum, frenulum is the part of your tongue that's underneath here. If this is injured, that's oftentimes very difficult to do unless there's some kind of force applied. So pushing a bottle in, pushing a spoon in, something like that, right? Holding cheeks. The auricular area is the ears. So anywhere on the ears, it's uncommon to get an injury there. It's oftentimes from being pulled or hit. Cheeks, again, kind of like more of like the squeezing. Parents are frustrated or a person is frustrated with eating behavior. Eyes, the sclera is the white part of your eyes. So if that is bloodshot or red, it can be a sign of potential abuse. And then patterned bruising, which is like from a belt or from an object, right? Okay. Now, the kinds of abuse that we talked about are oftentimes traumatic for the brain's development, right? So trauma is oftentimes something where a child feels extremely unsafe and that they believe that they might be in danger of dying. When the brain is experiencing that, it's going to learn how to wire itself to protect itself from that. So if you had come to some of the previous workshops, you remember I like to do the brain model with the hand. So for the people who haven't been to that, when you are born, you are born with almost a fully developed downstairs brain. So we're gonna put our hands like in a 4 position. This part of the brain is all related to emotions. It's all related to sensory, right? And it's connected to our brain stem, which is all of our automatic nervous system, right? So it's gonna help us sleep, it's gonna help us digest our food, right? It's gonna be regulating our heart rates, all of those things without thinking, it's automatic. This part of the brain is almost entirely developed when you're born, okay? There's parts that will change throughout, but more or less developed. The part that goes over the top of it, the tops, we'll say the upstairs brain, is not fully developed until about 25 or 26 years old. So this part of the brain is actually the part of the brain that pretty much so all of this falls under, but it's also where we learn to be able to use our words to express ourselves. It's the part of the brain that problem solves. It's the part of the brain that makes sense of the world around us, right? It's a really important part of our brain, and it's developing in every single one of your children right now, right? So when a child experiences some of those signs of abuse that we talked about earlier, the brain actually experiences shrinking in the prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain, and that's the part that is responsible for your mood and your emotional regulation. A lot of the times, because of the downstairs brain is our short-term memory, and the upstairs brain is our long-term memory. Now, if we're only functioning from the downstairs brain, it means that things that happened a long time ago can still feel like they actually just happened really recently, right? So when someone experiences trauma, even in their childhood, sometimes it can get activated even in your adulthood, right? Because of where it's stored in the brain. That can really hurt when we're trying to emotionally regulate or think rationally about an event, right? Because it happened a long time ago, but it feels like it just happened. The hippocampus shrinks. That's the part that can tell you how close it was to that event, right? And then the amygdala becomes overreactive. The amygdala is actually this little like almond in the middle of your brain, and it's responsible for our emotions. It becomes over-responsive because it's trying to protect us from things, right? It's trying to tell us when something's wrong. But if it's overreactive, right, it doesn't assess risk very well. So you might have a particularly hyperactive, moody child or adult. There was a study that came out called Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's actually been replicated all over the world in different cultures. And what they found was that these 10 experiences in childhood, which they considered adverse or negative experiences in childhood, create potential for not only disrupted neurodevelopment, but disease, disability, social problems, and early death in adulthood. When you look over here, you see the main types of abuse. You see physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, we talked about before. You also see the neglects, physical and emotional. And then they say household dysfunction, so events like an adult having a mental illness in your household that is not being treated for it, an incarcerated relative, typically a parent, domestic violence in the household. Children often, when they see particularly a parent being hurt by another parent, sometimes that's actually worse than them themselves being physically abused because that's their person who protects them. So they kind of feel that they're not protected then, right? Substance abuse, and then divorce. Now, there's basically a dosage effect, which means that the more of these things that happen in early childhood, the more likely that these events lead to health risks as adults. Okay, so that's all really difficult to digest. And so the highlight and the positive part of this is that even if you experience adverse childhood experiences, even if there is neglect or physical abuse in the home, there is potential for you to still develop in a way that is healthy. And that's if you have protective factors in your life, right? So that means that If there's something that's negative happening, but your parents are particularly resilient and they can show you their own healthy coping, right? That can help a child be able to understand a situation and process and get through it. If they have good social connections, right, in their family, they have safe adults, but they also have good friends. If they have concrete support in times of need, so they actually have people who will do something for them when they say that they need you to do something for them, right? They say that I'm in harm's way and then somebody protects them and helps them. It really helps when parents have a strong understanding of child development. That's a protective factor. Social emotional competence in the children themselves, which is why we feel so strongly about having strong social emotional curriculum in school so that children start to be able to have some of those skills to understand themselves, their feelings, and how to cope with those feelings. So if you have some of these protective factors, you are able to manage some of these events in your life in a more healthy way, be able to process and move through them. Ideally, that you're not re-experiencing them.
So interactions with children can look differently across the world. And they look different in different communities and different contexts. For example, when you think about the interactions that your children have with different adults in their lives, teachers, they may interact with a different way. Coaches might be a different experience. Nannies maybe as well. We also have to think about it in different countries. So those interactions may look different across cultures and countries across the world. For us, what cuts across that is the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which dictates what the child's rights are and what they should be afforded when it comes to respect and care. And so our policy and procedures that we've developed here and our practices for all of our faculty and staff really align with the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child, in addition to Thai law. I'm not going to read all of this out, but this was the Child Protection Act in 2003, and it states what it is as Thai citizens or residents in Thailand we need to abide by in terms of keeping our children safe. They'll be a little bit more specific than some of the factors that we've discussed already today, but I think they're pretty much in line. A few other ages that we want you to be aware of when it comes to safeguarding here in Thailand. The minimum age of criminal responsibility is 12 years old. The organization that we partnered with, Childline, has spoken to us and said that they're really advocating to raise that to 14 years old. But it's been tough, and I think it was even younger than 12 before their involvement and before changes were recently made. Children can be employed at 15 years old. Also at 15 is age of consent. This is interesting. Even between the ages of 15 and 18, children, minors, still need to get consent from parents in order to be sexually active. And that's from both sets of parents. So it's not considered consensual if children are not disclosing or having those conversations with both sets of parents who are involved in the sexual activity. Legal age for marriage is 17. Voting and military service registration begins at 18. Buying and alcohol, tobacco, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Technically, the legal age is 20, but we know that there are ways in which to get around that, of course. And really important, as of March 2025, this is quite significant, the corporal punishment is prohibited in Thailand, so using corporal punishment or physically hitting your child for their behavior or for any reason has essentially been outlawed here in Thailand. They are obviously working to implement the support systems and the ways to track and monitor that. But this was a significant change in Thai law that we were all celebrating as of March 2025. I didn't give Jessica much of a break, sorry. Do you want me to talk about drugs?
Okay. Right, so Thailand, well, to begin with, Justin and I were able to sit with Childline, who receives calls and is one of the agencies that work directly with abuse and I see a lot of surprised faces right now, the needs of children in Thailand. And and they shared with us that in Thailand there is an extremely easy access to pretty much so any drug that you would want. And unfortunately, they're also really marketed for children as well. You can see some of these drugs are in the shape of Peppa Pig and other cartoon animals and branded in a way that is enticing for younger people. And the other part of this is that there are delivery and line numbers for ease of access with these things. Unfortunately, it means that we need to be particularly hypervigilant about knowing what these things look like and how to access them. We also want to talk a little bit about sleepovers, which are a part of childhood and frankly can be a really important part of childhood in developing independence and being able to form stronger friendships and so forth, and certainly don't want to take that away from a child's experience. But we do want to encourage you to think about where your child is spending the night and to make sure that you're doing some of your own questioning beforehand so that you can be sure of the environment that your child will be part of. What we know is that about 90% of sexual abuse happens from somebody who the family knows and who they trust. We also know that about 40% of childhood sexual abuse happens from peers, happens from children who are 18 or under. So some of the things that will help you to safeguard to make sure that your child is in a safe environment are asking some of these questions, right? So the first is you want to know who's going to be watching your children, right? If they're going to be there the entire time, who's taking responsibility. You want to know if there'll be other adults in the house, whether that's their own relatives. You also want to know if there's older siblings in the house. Things like swimming pools and trampolines are there because of the physical aspects of it, right? These are the ways that children get injured the most. So if they are going to be using these things, we just want to make sure that they will be supervised in using those things, right? Do you have any guns in your house? So this is especially important if there are guns in the house, that they're stored and that they understand gun safety, right? What are your rules around screens and media use? I'm going to go into screens and media use after this. But you may have really good protections and safeguarding against screens at home, but if they're at their friend's house, you're going to want to know how much access do they have to these things, right? And pets in the house. That's just one for potential harm from a pet, but not my biggest concern. Some things to make sure that your child is prepared for when they go over for a sleepover. We do the pants rules, and I'll go over that in a little while, but that's our curriculum where we make sure that children understand their body boundaries, right? And know what to do if somebody crosses their body boundaries. We would suggest having a planned call with your child, especially the first time that they spend the night at somebody's house, just to say, hey, we're going to give a phone call around 6 o'clock and just check in. And when you have that phone call, the suggestion is to have a code word or phrase if your child is uncomfortable and they want to go home that they can say to you. The one that I read was, how's grandma doing? You can come up with your own, but it just gives that signal that says, like, actually, hey, I'm not feeling very comfortable here. And it's your cue to say, you know, actually, we need to take her home tonight for whatever reason, right? If your child is not quite ready for a sleepover, you can trial it, and they call it a sleep under, which is just basically that they pretend like they're having a sleepover until about 9 o'clock at night, and then you go pick them up and bring them home. They can bring their sleeping bag, they can do their movie, they can do their popcorn. They can feel like it's starting to be that, right? But you're still having the protection of having them home that night. So you might like to just trial it with maybe a little bit later of the night, bring them home that evening. Okay, Roblox, which a lot of us think is called roadblocks. UGCs are user-generated games, meaning that any one of us can create a game our own world, and we can upload it to Roblox. That is maybe exciting for developers, but is actually quite unsafe when it comes to being able to totally safeguard children from what they might find in these games. One of the big challenges of it is that the developer, you, me, or whoever, gets to decide who it's appropriate for. We are the raters, at least when it's initially uploaded. There are some things where they have like electronic, systems to kind of go through it, but they're not able to catch everything. And they do have people that eventually go through it and report, but that's not to say that we know how long a game would be online before a child sees it, right? So know that this world is 380 million monthly users, 400 million different games that are generated by users. It's also something that initially, when it first came out, it was rated for 7 years old and up. So initially, I think a lot of parents felt very comfortable with that, right? Because we trust our rating systems typically. The ESRB is the rating system for UK and Middle East, and PEGI is one that's used in the United States and Canada. But these are the rating boards, and they essentially both say either teen or caution. Caution meaning like, we don't even know if it's okay for teens, right? And that's because of some of the things that have been happening on Roblox that are really unsafe, right? So you can see here that inside of some of these games that might be rated okay for children, they might go into a specific room or place inside and find like a strip club. There are some environments, they call them condo games, where they might even be simulating sex acts or prostitution. And these are just things that children kind of wander into and don't really know what they're looking at, right? This is a perfect environment for child predators because of the anonymity of it, right? You don't have to know who they are, who's in the room with these children. And so because of that reason, there's no way to guarantee that there's no child predators on that platform or in that room with your child, right? There are other features of these games that are really tools that predators or groomers will use in order to gain relationship and trust from a child. So these people are looking at the long game. They're not necessarily going in for the short game. So they're using different things inside of here to build a relationship so that they trust them, right? Something that they might use is the digital currency. So digital currency is real money that you put up, right? And there's like gift cards and things. It's like very popular, but it's Robux in Roblox. But this is actual money that you can buy like different outfits and different like skins and things of that nature, right? And it's actually really difficult because one of the things that teaches children is or doesn't teach children is the value of money. So they're actually prone to developing more addiction behaviors just based on that alone because they want more of it, but they don't understand the value of what they're trying to purchase. But groomers will also use the lure of giving you Robux, right, in order to gain your trust, right? So one thing that you should really consider is if your child is using Roblox, that you are not allowing for any use of currency on that website. The other thing is there's something called loot boxes, which essentially are you pay a particular amount of Robux. This is very difficult to say. And inside of that is just a bunch of loot, essentially, but you don't know what you're going to get, right? And what we understand from that is like it has a similar mechanism in terms of the way that your brain releases dopamine to kind of become addictive. So it's exciting to know what you're getting, and then you want to do more and more of that to be able to see this special prize. But again, this is real money, and you don't know what you're getting inside of these boxes. Similar to Roblox is another UGC platform. So you might be familiar with Fortnite. Fortnite is slightly different in that there are some games on here that are developed by Epic, right? So that's not all UGC games, meaning it's not individually developed games, right? But they have it on their platform, many, many UGC games, right? The only three that I'm aware of that are just developed by Epic are these Save the World, Creative, and Battle Royale. But even within this, there tends to be 100 players inside of the game who are probably strangers, I assume. Maybe you know some of them. And you're fighting a battle. Some of the concerns around that is that about 85% of Fortnite players are between the ages of 18 and 35, so these are adults, right? So you need to be really thoughtful with who's interacting with your child in this environment. I would argue that the environment itself is kind of questionable because it's war games, but certainly the people who are playing it when it's not restricted can be a big problem. There are features in Roblox and Fortnite that enable chats, right? In the parental controls, you can limit chats. You can decide who your child can talk to or not talk to, or you can say that they can't talk to anybody at all. But there is a feature in Fortnite where in the text, they can send links, and that can be to outside like Discord or other types of ways to chat. So whereas you might assume your child's not chatting inside of the actual game, they're using a different app to talk to their whoever is playing with them, if that makes sense. So there's lots of ins and outs, and we know that our children end up being very smart at trying to manipulate this, and I have never played Fortnite or Roblox myself, so it's difficult to catch up with and know exactly what the risks are because it's always changing, and they're adapting because they're playing it and learning it too, right? And the same goes for Fortnite in terms of the digital currency. It still has things like, they call it V-Bucks for that, but it is real money that you're spending, and it can be used in the same ways that the risks are for Roblox. And in terms of the rating for this, it's rated teen by ESRB, and it's rated caution from PEGI. There are parental controls. So there are some things that if you are a family that feel really strongly about gaming, or you want to try to kind of figure out a way to be in the middle on this, there are some different ways that you can try to safeguard your child. The first one is like playing together. So you know exactly what their world is and what's happening, right? You can also make sure to monitor where the devices are and the use of it, right? How long can they play? Where can they play it? They shouldn't be playing it in their rooms. They need to be playing it where you can see what's happening, right? You can pay for private or VIP servers, which means that you just have more control over who's in the room with you. And that's typically done by subscription on whatever the website is, right? So if it's Fortnite or Roblox, you could pay a subscription for that. There are built-in parental controls in all of these games. One of the things, though, is because it's always a developing game, just like when you use like Instagram or Facebook, like they're always updating their privacy or they're changing something behind the scenes and we don't really understand what it is or how they're using our information. The same is true here. So just know that you might have already gone on and set your parental controls and have a sense of what it is, but it can change without really being notified. And so you need to be very up to date and kind of consistently looking at it to make sure that it's being safeguarding your child. There are pins for children's accounts too. So you could set up your own pin to just add that second layer of protection so that your child cannot go in and change the parental controls on it. You probably want to change your pin from time and time again. And then you want to also just be talking to your child about not sharing personal information and trying to create that safe space for your child in the instance that they do see something that is disturbing so that they feel they can come and talk to you and that they won't be in trouble for it, right? So we want to have a space where they feel like they can be safe with their adult about it. Oftentimes, if they do fall into something and see something that they didn't need to, right, it's not because they were looking for it, it might have just happened, right? I feel like such a bearer of bad news. YouTube Kids. So YouTube Kids, just like YouTube for adults, has user-generated content on it, meaning that YouTube does not upload the videos to YouTube. Individual users upload videos to YouTube. It's also ran by an algorithm, an autoplay. So it is choosing for you what you're going to watch next based on if you watched the whole thing and if you seem to like it, right? So it's trying to figure out how it can keep you on that platform for as long as possible by figuring out what you like. Because there are people who are uploading content, we have found that there's some content on YouTube that you would think your child could watch, like Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol. But if you watch the full episode, you might see some very disturbing content in it, right? So there's different images of Peppa Pig with guns, there's these characters doing drugs, lots of things that you don't need your child to be seeing, right? And I think in addition to that, we call this like a short video platform, particularly the ones that are really like short clips of things, right? That make you like either laugh or like kind of fun to watch, right? Like the cute little dog videos that I watch. But these things are not great for our brain, and they're particularly not great for brain development, right? So we talked earlier, like the brain is developing until we're 26 years old. It doesn't stop then, but like the most of it is developing by then. So the architecture of a child's brain is taking all of this in, and it's wiring itself in a way that is maladaptive, really, right? And so these short videos on these short platforms, like including TikTok and Instagram Reels and things of that nature, they're so short that they create a lot of pleasure hormones, mostly dopamine in the brain. So it floods the brain because this feels really good, that's hilarious, I'm enjoying this, it's giving me content that I'm consistently really liking, right? But then when I stop watching it, my brain is gonna try to reach homeostasis by having a reduction in it, right? And that's creating addictions, right, to the material in the same way that we might get addicted to a drug or alcohol. But it's also changing the way in which our front brain is able to focus and pay attention, and for how long we can sustain attention on one topic. So it's hurting kids in the ways that they are able to learn, right? It's also hurting social interactions because you need to be able to stay attuned and attentive to somebody in order to have a real connection, right? And if you're just kind of wanting to be on your phone or be looking at content and having that dopamine release, you're not getting that interaction. There are some platforms that are healthier for kids to watch. And so these have either stronger parental controls, because these platforms are the materials uploaded by these companies. They're not uploaded by individual users, right? So you can actually go on to say Netflix Kids, and you can decide upfront what things they can watch and have that available to them, right? So you already know what's available to them and feel comfortable with what they're watching. PBS Kids is largely like educational, and Sesame Street, that kind of stuff. Disney Plus has pretty strong parental controls that you can go through and decide what you're comfortable with. Noggin is generally for like earlier years, for younger kids. It's like a Nickelodeon subsidiary. Am I doing okay on time? Okay. Okay, we're almost done with the doom and gloom. This last part is about AI chatbots. There's lots of different versions of this. We'll just, I think what maybe we're most familiar with is ChatGPT, right? But there's lots of different kinds of chatbots out there. And I mean, it's a great resource in a lot of ways. And I'm not suggesting that we stay entirely away from AI, because it is going to be part of our future. It's our here and now. But the thing is it's not developed for children, and also it's developing at a pace that's so quick that there's not good safeguards in place, and we also don't have a lot of information about how it's impacting brain development and so forth. So it's just something that is really not made for children. In fact, ChatGPT itself says Basically, their guideline is 13. I would argue that's not old enough, but even if a child under 13 is going to use it for educational purposes, it needs to still be conducted by an adult, right? So we shouldn't be allowing children to just be asking ChatGPT questions. Partly, what we're also noticing is that, kids' brains are still kind of magical. Like they have magical thinking, right? They don't have a true sense of that the chatbot is not a human, right? And they can actually form like friendships, emotional relationships with chatbots. And to be honest, we also have seen adults who are forming like friendships and emotional relationships with chatbots. And those relationships are not healthy relationships. Chatbots have been programmed to try to keep you on and also respond in a way that you want them to respond, right? So we know particularly when it comes to mental health things, if you're going to a chatbot for support, that they're going to try to find an answer that they think that you want to hear. So we have seen some of this like dangerous advice around things like self-harm and suicide, around seeking mental health support. I know like some of the examples were like how to self-harm and hide the marks, right? How to write a suicide note, how to be intoxicated at school and hide it, right? So they're asking questions like this and then receiving some type of feedback back instead of talking to a mental health professional, right? I know that ChatGPT is trying to curb some of this, and they did make some updates with their last version, but it's still not safe enough for children to be using it without any adult supervision. Okay.